Police officer finds homeless little girl collecting trash with baby in her arms. What she said broke everyone's heart. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning mist hung thick over Maple Street as Officer Daniel Matthews stepped out of his patrol car, the crisp October air filling his lungs. At 32, Daniel had walked these quiet residential streets countless times, but something felt different today. The usual sounds of suburban life, lawn mowers humming, children playing, were strangely absent. Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound that made his heart skip a beat. Crying. Not the tantrum of a frustrated child, but something deeper, more desperate. Daniel's trained ears picked up the sound immediately, and his eyes began searching the empty sidewalk ahead. What he saw next would change everything. A small figure emerged from behind a row of garbage cans, moving slowly down the sidewalk. As Daniel stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a little girl, no more than 6 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. But what truly broke his heart was what she carried. Strapped to her chest with a faded blue blanket was a baby, tiny, fragile, and clearly unwell. The infant's weak cries echoed through the morning air, a sound that would haunt Daniel's dreams for weeks to come. In the girl's free hand, she clutched a plastic bag filled with empty bottles and cans, her small fingers white from gripping it so tightly. "Hey there, sweetheart," Daniel called softly, his voice gentle as he approached. "Are you okay?" The little girl stopped walking and looked up at him with the largest, most frightened brown eyes he'd ever seen. For a moment, she seemed ready to run, but the weight of the baby made movement difficult. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the baby's cries. "Please don't take my brother away. I'm taking good care of him, I promise." Daniel's heart shattered into a million pieces. In all his years as a police officer, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. 2 children, alone on the street with no adult in sight. The morning air carried the faint scent of the baby's tears, a smell that would become forever etched in Daniel's memory. "What's your name, honey?" Daniel asked, crouching down to her level, making himself less intimidating. "Sophie," she replied, adjusting the baby against her chest. "And this is Leo. He's sick, but I'm gonna make him better. Found some food yesterday, and I gave him all the good parts." The innocent determination in her voice made Daniel's throat tighten. Here was a child, barely old enough for 1st grade, trying to care for an infant with nothing but love and hope. "Where are your parents, Sophie?" A shadow crossed her face, and she looked down at her worn sneakers. "Mama went away to find work, and Daddy said he'd be right back, but that was..." She paused, counting on her fingers. Lots of days ago. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the October morning. As he looked at these 2 vulnerable children, he realized this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would test everything he believed about justice, family, and the power of one person to make a difference. The baby's cries grew weaker, and Sophie's eyes filled with tears she was trying desperately not to shed. "Officer," she said, her voice breaking, "can you help me save my baby?" Daniel's police station had never felt so warm and welcoming as it did when he gently guided Sophie and baby Leo through the front doors. The little girl clutched her brother protectively, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space filled with desks, computers, and busy officers. "Don't worry, Sophie," Daniel said softly, leading them to a quiet corner. "We're going to help you and Leo." Within minutes, Daniel had called for backup. Not the kind that involved sirens and flashing lights, but the kind that involved compassion and expertise. Enter Mariana Cruz, the county's most dedicated social worker, whose warm smile could melt even the coldest hearts. At 29, Mariana had seen countless cases, but something about the way Sophie protectively held her baby brother made her heart skip a beat. The same soft crying that had haunted Daniel now filled the small office, creating an atmosphere of urgent tenderness. "Hello, beautiful," Mariana said, settling into a chair across from Sophie. "I'm Mariana, and I heard you've been taking very good care of your little brother." Sophie's grip on Leo tightened. "I give him all my food. I found a warm place behind the big store where the trucks come. I kept him dry when it rained. Daniel and Mariana exchanged a meaningful glance. This wasn't just a missing parents case. This was something far more complex and heartbreaking. Sophie, you've been so brave, Mariana continued, her voice gentle but probing. Can you tell me more about your mama and daddy? When did you last see them? Sophie's face scrunched up in concentration. Mama said she was going to find a really good job, so we could have a big house with a yard. She kissed me and Leo goodbye and said she'd be back soon. Her voice became smaller. But then Daddy started acting funny. He kept leaving and forgetting to come back. One day he said he had to fix something important and that I was the big sister now. The revelation hit both adults like a thunderbolt. This wasn't abandonment in the way they'd initially thought. This was a mother desperately seeking a better life, and a father struggling with his own problems, leaving two innocent children to fend for themselves. How long have you been taking care of Leo by yourself? Mariana asked carefully. Sophie held up both hands, then folded down 3 fingers. This many weeks, maybe more. I stopped counting after I ran out of fingers. Daniel felt his chest tighten. 7 weeks. A 6-year-old had been caring for an infant for nearly 2 months, surviving on scraps and determination. And Leo's cough? Mariana inquired, noticing how the baby's breathing seemed labored. It started a few days ago. I tried to keep him extra warm, but Sophie's voice trailed off, and for the first time her brave facade began to crack. I don't know how to make him better. I tried giving him water, but he just keeps crying. Baby Leo's whimpers grew weaker, and Daniel noticed something that made his blood run cold. The infant's lips had a slight bluish tint. Mariana, Daniel whispered urgently, we need to get Leo to a doctor. Now. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Sophie grabbed Daniel's sleeve with surprising strength. You promise you won't separate us? She pleaded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Leo needs me. I'm all he has. The raw desperation in her voice echoed through the station, and Daniel realized that saving these children would require more than just medical attention and paperwork. It would require healing 2 broken hearts that had learned to depend only on each other. I promise, Sophie, Daniel said, though he had no idea how he'd keep that promise. We're going to take care of both of you. But as they rushed toward the hospital, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger, more complicated story. The pediatric ward at Mercy General Hospital buzzed with its usual activity, but Dr. Sarah Chen had never encountered a case quite like this one. As she examined baby Leo, Sophie sat in a chair beside the examination table, refusing to let go of her brother's tiny hand. His breathing is definitely compromised, Dr. Chen explained to Daniel and Mariana, speaking in gentle terms that Sophie could understand. But the good news is, this is something we can treat. Leo just needs some medicine and rest. Sophie's shoulders sagged with relief. So he's going to be okay? He's going to be fine. Dr. Chen smiled. But I need to ask you some questions, Sophie. You've been taking such good care of him. I can tell you love your brother very much. As Dr. Chen continued her examination, she discovered something that made Daniel and Mariana's investigation take an unexpected turn. Leo wasn't just suffering from a respiratory infection. He was also severely malnourished and dehydrated. This little one hasn't been getting proper nutrition for quite some time, Dr. Chen whispered to the adults. But what's remarkable is that Sophie here seems to be in much better condition. It's almost as if she was giving him most of her food, Mariana finished, her voice filled with admiration and heartbreak. The revelation painted a clearer picture of just how much Sophie had sacrificed for her baby brother. While she had been finding food, scraps from dumpsters, handouts from kind strangers, she had been ensuring Leo got the best portions, leaving herself with barely enough to survive. Sophie, Daniel said gently, you're an incredible big sister, but we need to understand more about your family. Do you remember your address, where you used to live? Sophie's face brightened. The blue house with the broken fence. Mama always said she was going to fix it, but she never had time. It's on the street with the big tree that looks like a dinosaur. Daniel made a mental note to investigate further. If they could find the family's home, they might uncover more clues about what had happened to Sophie and Leo's parents. Dr. Chen finished her examination and turned to the group. Leo needs to stay overnight for observation and treatment. His condition isn't critical, but we want to make sure his breathing improves and get some proper nutrition into him. Can I stay with him? Sophie asked immediately, her voice filled with worry. Of course, sweetheart, Mariana said. We wouldn't dream of separating you two. As they settled Leo into a comfortable hospital room, Daniel noticed something that would prove crucial to their investigation. Tucked into Sophie's small backpack, the only possession she'd managed to keep, was a faded photograph. The picture showed a happy family, a young woman with Sophie's eyes, a man with a gentle smile, baby Leo, and Sophie herself, all standing in front of the blue house she'd described. Sophie, who is this? Daniel asked, pointing to the man in the photo. That's Daddy, Sophie said proudly. That was before he got sad all the time. He used to read me stories and teach me how to tie my shoes. Mariana studied the photograph carefully. There was something familiar about the woman, something that nagged at the back of her mind. And this is your mama? Uh-huh. Her name is Elena. She makes the best pancakes in the whole world, and she always smells like flowers. Sophie's voice grew wistful. She said when she came back we'd have pancakes every morning. As the evening settled over the hospital and Leo's breathing began to improve with treatment, Daniel and Mariana stepped into the hallway to discuss their next moves. There's something about this case that doesn't add up, Mariana said quietly. A mother who loves her children doesn't just disappear, and a father who reads bedtime stories doesn't abandon his kids without a reason. Daniel nodded, fingering the photograph in his hands. I have a feeling we're about to uncover something much bigger than we initially thought. Neither of them could have predicted just how right they were, or how their investigation would reveal a web of circumstances that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and the lengths people go to protect the ones they love. Morning light filtered through the hospital windows as Sophie woke up curled in the chair beside Leo's bed. For the first time in weeks, she had slept peacefully, knowing her brother was safe and getting better. The sound of his steady breathing, no longer labored, filled her with a joy she'd almost forgotten existed. Good morning, sunshine, Mariana said softly, entering the room with a warm smile and a cup of hot chocolate. How did you sleep? Really good, Sophie replied, stretching her small arms. Leo didn't cry once all night. Look, his cheeks are pink again. Indeed, baby Leo looked remarkably better after just one night of proper medical care and nutrition. His breathing was clear, and his eyes were brighter than they'd been in days. Daniel arrived shortly after, carrying a small bag of clothes that the hospital staff had donated. I thought you might like some fresh clothes, Sophie. And I have some news about your house. Sophie's eyes lit up with hope. Did you find Mama and Daddy? Daniel knelt down beside her chair, his expression gentle but serious. We found your house, sweetheart. The blue one with the broken fence, just like you described. But... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Nobody's been living there for a while. The hope in Sophie's eyes flickered but didn't die completely. Maybe they're just visiting someone. Mama said she might stay with Aunt Rosa while she looked for work. Mariana sat down on the other side of Sophie's chair. Tell us about Aunt Rosa, honey. Do you know where she lives? Sophie scrunched up her forehead, thinking hard. She lives far away in the place where they speak Spanish like Mama sometimes does. Mama said if anything ever happened, Aunt Rosa would take care of us, but her voice grew smaller. I don't know how to find her. Daniel and Mariana exchanged a meaningful look. This was the first real lead they'd had about Sophie's extended family. What's your mama's full name, Sophie? Mariana asked gently. Elena Maria Vasquez. And Daddy is Michael David Thompson. But Mama kept her special name because she said it connected her to her family. As Mariana wrote down the names, she felt that familiar nagging sensation again. Elena Vasquez. Why did that name ring a bell? Dr. Chen entered the room for Leo's morning checkup, bringing more good news. This little fighter is responding beautifully to treatment. His breathing is completely normal now, and he's gained half a pound since yesterday. Sophie beamed with pride. I told you Leo was strong. He's the bravest baby in the whole world. You know what, Sophie? Dr. Chen said, checking Leo's chart. I think the love and care you gave him during those difficult weeks probably saved his life. You protected him when he needed it most. For the first time since Daniel had found them on Maple Street, Sophie's smile reached her eyes completely. She had been carrying the weight of responsibility for so long, fearing she wasn't doing enough for Leo. Hearing that she had actually helped save him transformed something deep inside her heart. Can we go see our house? Sophie asked suddenly. Maybe Mama left us a message, or maybe Daddy came back. Daniel considered this carefully. It might be helpful for Sophie to see the house again, and it could provide more clues for their investigation. I think that's a good idea. Would you like Mariana and me to take you there? Sophie nodded eagerly, then looked back at Leo with concern. But I don't want to leave Leo alone. Leo will be perfectly safe with the nurses, Dr. Chen assured her, and will only be gone for a little while. Sometimes going home, even when it's changed, can help us understand what happens next. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Sophie carefully kissed Leo's forehead and whispered something in his ear that made the baby smile, his first real smile since they'd been found. What did you tell him? Mariana asked, touched by the tender moment. I told him that we're going to find our family, Sophie said with quiet determination, and that no matter what happens, we'll always have each other. Neither Daniel nor Mariana had the heart to tell her that finding her parents might not lead to the reunion she was hoping for. But as they walked toward the parking garage, both adults felt a growing determination of their own to ensure that Sophie and Leo would indeed always have each other, no matter what the investigation revealed. The blue house on Elmwood Street stood exactly as Sophie had described it. Weathered siding, a broken fence, and a massive oak tree in the front yard that did indeed look remarkably like a dinosaur. But what Sophie hadn't mentioned, because she was too young to understand its significance, was the "For Rent" sign planted firmly in the overgrown front lawn. It looked smaller than I remembered, Sophie said quietly, stepping out of Daniel's patrol car and staring at her former home. Daniel's heart ached as he watched her small figure take in the reality of her abandoned house. The windows were dark, and weeds had grown tall around the front steps where Sophie had probably played just months before. Can we go inside? Sophie asked, her voice hopeful but cautious. Let me check with the landlord first, Daniel said, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, he had secured permission to enter the property for their investigation. The front door creaked open to reveal a mostly empty house. The family's furniture was gone, but scattered throughout the rooms were the remnants of a life interrupted. Children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator, a few forgotten toys in the corners, and the lingering scent of the flowers that Elena used to love. Sophie ran immediately to what had been her bedroom, now empty except for a few colorful crayon marks on the wall where she had once drawn a family of stick figures. Mama said I could draw on this wall because it was going to be painted anyway, Sophie explained, tracing the figures with her finger. That's me, that's Leo, that's Mama, and that's Daddy. We were going to get a dog too, but Daddy said we had to wait until we had a bigger yard. Mariana studied the drawing more carefully and noticed something that made her breath catch. In the corner, written in a child's handwriting, were the words, Elena's memory box, under the big rock. Sophie, what's Elena's memory box? Sophie's eyes widened with excitement. Oh, Mama's special hiding place. She showed me once where she kept important things. She said if anything ever happened, I should remember the big rock. They followed Sophie to the backyard, where a large decorative stone sat near what had once been a small garden. Together, Daniel and Sophie moved the rock to reveal a weatherproof container buried underneath. Inside the box was a treasure trove of clues that would change everything they thought they knew about Elena Vasquez. There were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to different government offices, employers, and immigration services. Most importantly, there was a letter addressed to my beautiful children in Elena's careful handwriting. Sophie, would you like me to read your mama's letter? Mariana asked gently. Sophie nodded, settling cross-legged on the grass as Mariana opened the sealed envelope. My dearest Sophie and Leo, Mariana read aloud. If you are reading this, it means something has happened, and I couldn't come back to you yet. I want you to know that every day I have been away from you. I have been working to build us a better life. I found a good job in California, but the people who help workers like me said I needed to get special papers first. I have been saving every penny to bring you to our new home, where you can have your own rooms and Leo can have a safe place to play." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Her mama hadn't abandoned them. She had been trying to create a better life for her family. The letter continued, "I asked your daddy to take care of you while I worked on getting everything ready, but I know he has been struggling since Grandpa died. If something happens and Daddy can't take care of you, remember that Aunt Rosa lives in San Diego, and she loves you both very much. Her address is in this box." Daniel and Mariana found Aunt Rosa's contact information, along with copies of Elena's job applications, proof of employment, and evidence that she had been working with an immigration lawyer to secure proper documentation for her family. But there was one more item in the box that changed everything. A recent letter from Elena, postmarked just 2 weeks ago, addressed to Michael Thompson. "Sophie," Daniel said carefully, "it looks like your mama has been trying to contact your daddy. She didn't know that he had left you alone. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, but they revealed a story far more complex than anyone had imagined. Elena wasn't a mother who had abandoned her children. She was a mother desperately trying to build a legal path to bring her family to safety. And Michael wasn't necessarily a father who didn't care. He was a man struggling with his own problems who had made a terrible decision in a moment of crisis. As they packed up the memory box, Sophie looked up at Daniel with eyes full of new understanding. "So, Mama is trying to come back to us?" "Yes, sweetheart," Daniel replied. "And now we know how to find her." The phone call to San Diego would change everything. But first, Daniel and Mariana had to figure out how to explain to a woman named Rosa Vasquez that her niece and nephew had been living on the streets for weeks, while she had no idea they were in danger. Back at the hospital, Sophie sat beside Leo's bed, carefully sorting through the items from her mother's memory box. She held each letter like a precious treasure, even though she couldn't read most of the words. "Sophie," Mariana said gently, "we're going to call Aunt Rosa now. Would you like to talk to her?" Sophie's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "What if she doesn't remember me? I was really little when I saw her last." "Something tells me she remembers you very well," Daniel said with a smile. When Mariana dialed the number they'd found in Elena's box, a warm voice answered on the second ring. "Hola, Rosa Vasquez speaking." "Ms. Vasquez, my name is Mariana Cruz. I'm a social worker calling about your niece Sophie and nephew Leo." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Sophie? Leo? Dios mío, where are they? Where is Elena? I haven't heard from her in over a month and I've been so worried." The conversation that followed revealed yet another layer to this complicated family story. Rosa explained that Elena had been calling her regularly with updates about her job and her progress with the immigration paperwork. But those calls had stopped abruptly 5 weeks ago, and Rosa had been frantically trying to reach her sister. "Elena was supposed to bring the children to stay with me once her papers were approved," Rosa explained, her voice thick with emotion. "She said Michael was having a hard time, but she thought he could handle watching them for just a few more weeks. If I had known, I would have driven there immediately." When Mariana explained what had happened, how Sophie had been caring for Leo on the streets, how they'd been found, and how they were now safe, Rosa's reaction was immediate and decisive. "I'm coming to get them, today. I don't care how long the drive takes." "Aunt Rosa?" Sophie said tentatively, taking the phone from Mariana with trembling hands. "Mi niña preciosa." Rosa's voice came through the phone like a warm hug. "Is that really my Sophie?" "Aunt Rosa, Leo is sick, but the doctor says he's getting better. And I took good care of him, just like Mama taught me." "You are so brave, mija. Your Mama would be so proud of you. Can you put Leo on the phone?" Sophie giggled, the first truly happy sound Daniel had heard from her. "Leo can't talk yet, Aunt Rosa. He's still a baby. But I can hold the phone so he can hear you." As Sophie held the phone near Leo's ear, Rosa began singing a gentle lullaby in Spanish, the same song Elena used to sing to both children. Leo's eyes widened with recognition, and he reached toward the phone with his tiny hands, as if he somehow remembered his aunt's voice. "Sophie," Rosa said, her voice now speaking to the whole room, "I want you to know that your mama never stopped trying to come back to you. She calls me every week to tell me how many more days until she can bring you home. The last time we talked, she said it would only be 2 more weeks. This revelation hit everyone like lightning. Elena hadn't disappeared. She had been working right up until the moment Michael left the children alone. She probably had no idea that her children were in danger. "We need to contact Elena immediately," Daniel said to Mariana. "She deserves to know that her children are safe." Dr. Chen entered the room at that moment with wonderful news. "Leo is ready to be discharged. His recovery has been remarkable." Sophie looked around the room at all the adults who had been helping her and Leo, and for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope for the future. "Aunt Rosa," Sophie said into the phone, "will you really come get us? I'm already packing my car, sweetheart. I'll be there before bedtime, and then we're going to call your mama together and surprise her with the best news she's ever heard, that her babies are safe and sound." As the afternoon wore on and they waited for Rosa's arrival, Daniel found himself thinking about how quickly this case had evolved from a simple child welfare situation into something much more complex and beautiful. A story about family, determination, and the incredible lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces of this puzzle they hadn't uncovered yet. What had really happened to Michael? And how would Elena react when she learned what her children had endured? The answers to those questions would come sooner than anyone expected. Rosa Vasquez arrived at the hospital just as the sun was setting, carrying 2 large suitcases and the biggest, warmest smile Sophie had seen in months. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and Elena's same gentle demeanor, and the moment she saw Sophie and Leo, she burst into tears of relief. "Mis niños," she whispered, gathering both children into her arms. "I'm never letting you out of my sight again." Sophie melted into her aunt's embrace, feeling for the first time in weeks like a child instead of a caregiver. Leo, sensing the love and warmth radiating from this familiar stranger, gurgled happily and reached for Rosa's face. "He remembers me." Rosa laughed through her tears. "Elena used to video call me every week so I could watch him grow. And Sophie, look how tall you've gotten." Daniel and Mariana watched this reunion with full hearts, but their work wasn't finished yet. They still needed to locate Elena, and perhaps more importantly, understand what had happened to Michael Thompson. "Rosa," Mariana said gently, "we need to ask you about Michael. Elena's letters suggest he was struggling with something. Do you know what was going on with him?" Rosa's expression grew serious as she settled into a chair with Leo in her arms. "Michael was a good man. He loved Elena and the children very much. But when his father died 6 months ago, something changed." Sophie looked up from where she was showing Rosa her mother's memory box. "Daddy got really sad after Grandpa went to heaven. He used to cry when he thought I wasn't looking." Rosa nodded sadly. "Michael's father was everything to him. When he passed away, Michael lost his job. He couldn't concentrate, couldn't function normally. Elena told me he was seeing a counselor, trying to get better, but grief affects everyone differently," Daniel said, understanding beginning to dawn on him. "Elena didn't want to leave him alone with the children," Rosa continued, "but her opportunity in California had a deadline. She thought if she could just get established, earn enough money, and get her immigration status sorted out, she could bring everyone out there for a fresh start." Dr. Chen, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Grief can be overwhelming, especially when combined with financial stress and the pressure of caring for small children alone." Sophie looked confused. "But Daddy didn't take care of us. He left us alone." Rosa knelt down to Sophie's level, her voice gentle but honest. "Sometimes when adults are hurting very badly inside, they make choices that don't make sense. Your daddy probably thought he was going to come back quickly, but when you're grieving and confused, time feels different." "So he didn't mean to abandon us?" Sophie asked, her young mind trying to process this complex adult situation. I don't think he did, Mija. I think he was just too sad and lost to think clearly. Daniel's radio crackled to life, interrupting the conversation. It was his partner with news about their search for Michael Thompson. Daniel, we found him. He's alive, but he's been staying at a men's shelter downtown. He's been asking about his kids every day, but he was too afraid to contact authorities because he thought he'd be in trouble for leaving them. The news hit the room like a bombshell. Michael hadn't disappeared. He had been struggling with guilt and fear, believing that he had made such a terrible mistake that he couldn't face the consequences. He wants to see them, Daniel's partner continued over the radio. But he understands if that's not possible. He just wants to know they're safe. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of a child trying to understand how someone she loved could hurt her, while still loving her at the same time. "Does Daddy know about Mama?" Sophie asked quietly. Rosa shook her head. "I don't think anyone has told him that Elena has been working to bring the family together." Daniel looked around the room at this complex, beautiful, broken, and healing family. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for all of you to have a conversation. Together." Mariana nodded. "But first, we need to call Elena. She deserves to know that her children are safe before we take any other steps." As Rosa pulled out her phone to make the most important call of her life, Sophie moved closer to Leo's hospital bed and whispered the same words she had been saying to him for weeks. "Don't worry, Leo. Everything's going to be okay now. Our family is coming back together." For the first time since this journey began, those words felt like more than just hope. They felt like truth. The hospital room fell silent as Rosa dialed Elena's number, her hands trembling slightly. Sophie sat on the edge of Leo's bed, holding her brother's hand, while Daniel and Mariana positioned themselves nearby, ready to provide support for whatever emotional storm was about to unfold. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Rosa, Dios mío, Rosa." Elena's voice came through the speaker, tinged with worry and exhaustion. "I've been trying to call you for days, but my phone was stolen at work. I just got a new one. How are my babies? How is Michael? I was supposed to get my final paperwork this week, but there's been a delay and—" "Elena," Rosa interrupted gently, "I need you to sit down, Hermana. I have news about Sophie and Leo." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. What kind of news?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "They're safe," Rosa said quickly. "They're both safe and healthy, and they're here with me right now." "Here? Where is here?" "Rosa, you're scaring me. Where is Michael? Why do you have my children?" Daniel nodded to Rosa, signaling that it was time to explain everything. What followed was one of the most difficult conversations any of them had ever experienced. Rosa carefully explained how Sophie and Leo had been found, how they had been living on the streets, and how they were now recovering in the hospital. With each detail, Elena's sobs grew louder and more heartbroken. "No, no, no," Elena cried. "This isn't possible. Michael promised me he would take care of them. He promised. I never would have left if I thought, oh, my poor babies, my poor little Sophie. She's just a baby herself." "Mama," Sophie said quietly, moving closer to the phone. "Mama, is that you?" The sound of her daughter's voice seemed to break something inside Elena. Her crying intensified, but now it was mixed with relief and joy. "Sophie, mi amor, mi niña preciosa. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Where is Leo?" "I'm okay, Mama. And Leo is okay, too. I took good care of him, just like you taught me. But Mama—" Sophie's voice grew smaller. "I was scared. I didn't know where you were. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Mama has been working so hard to bring you to our new home, but I never thought. I thought Daddy was taking good care of you." Daniel made a difficult decision. He signaled to Rosa and gently took the phone. "Elena, this is Officer Daniel Matthews. I'm the one who found your children. I need you to know that Sophie saved Leo's life. She kept him fed, warm, and protected for weeks. She's the bravest little girl I've ever met." Elena's crying quieted as she processed this information. "Officer, I need to come get them right now. I can be there tomorrow if I drive all night." Elena, there's something else you need to know, Daniel continued. We found Michael. He's been staying at a shelter here in town. He's not doing well, but he's alive. The revelation that Michael was nearby and had been suffering alone added another layer of complexity to an already emotional situation. I don't understand, Elena said. If he's in town, why weren't my children with him? Rosa took the phone back. Elena, Michael has been struggling with depression since his father died. He made a terrible mistake, but I don't think he meant to abandon the children permanently. He left my babies alone for weeks? Elena's voice was filled with a mother's fury mixed with heartbreak. Sophie, listening to her mother's pain, made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. Mama, she said, taking the phone again. Daddy didn't mean to hurt us. He was just too sad to think right. Maybe if we all talked together, we could help him feel better. The wisdom and compassion in Sophie's words silenced the room. Here was a 6-year-old child who had every right to be angry and resentful, instead showing empathy for the father who had failed to protect her. Sophie, Elena said through her tears, you have such a big heart, just like your papa always said. Daniel stepped into the hallway to take an urgent call from his partner. What he learned would completely change everything they thought they knew about this family. Daniel, you need to hear this. His partner's voice was serious. I've been digging into Michael Thompson's background. He's been working odd jobs for weeks, trying to earn money to follow Elena to California. Daniel felt his world shift. What do you mean? The shelter director says Michael has been saving every penny. He keeps a notebook where he writes letters to his kids every day. He wasn't planning to abandon them. He was trying to earn enough for bus tickets to reunite the family. Back in the hospital room, Elena was making plans to drive through the night, but Rosa stopped her. Elena, there's something else you need to know. Rosa explained about finding Michael at the shelter, about his daily inquiries about his children, and about his plan to reunite the family. Elena listened in stunned silence. So he was trying to come to us? Elena asked, her voice filled with confusion. Daniel returned with shocking information. Elena, Michael has been working and saving money. According to his notes, he planned to surprise you by showing up in California with the children. The room fell silent as everyone processed this revelation. The story they had constructed about abandonment was suddenly much more complicated. But he left us alone, Sophie said quietly. Daniel knelt down to Sophie's level. Sometimes adults make really bad decisions when they're trying to do something good. Your daddy thought he could earn the money quickly and be back before you noticed. Elena's voice came through the speaker, thick with emotion. Michael always tried to fix everything by himself. Mariana spoke up. Elena, before anyone makes big decisions, we need to consider what's best for Sophie and Leo. They need stability. Sophie looked up with worried eyes. Does that mean we can't be with Mama and Daddy? No, sweetheart, Mariana said gently. It means we need to make sure everyone gets the help they need first. Rosa made a suggestion that would change everything. What if Elena comes here, and we all figure this out together as a family? Daniel felt something shift in the room, a sense that they were finally approaching this with the wisdom it deserved. Elena, he said, what if you came here not just to collect your children, but to help us figure out how to heal your family? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steadier. Officer Matthews, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that this family has been broken by circumstances, not by lack of love. And I think it can be put back together stronger than before. Sophie squeezed Leo's hand and looked around the room. Mama, she said into the phone, I think Officer Daniel has a really good idea. The next morning brought Elena's difficult decision to leave her California job and drive back to her children. It would set back her immigration plans by months, but as she told Rosa, my children are more important than any paperwork. Daniel and Mariana coordinated what would be one of the most delicate family reunions they had ever facilitated. They arranged for Michael to meet with a counselor before seeing his children. Sophie, Mariana said gently, today you're going to see your daddy. He's been very sad and sorry about what happened. How do you feel? Sophie considered this carefully. I missed him, she said finally. But I was also mad at him. Is it okay to feel both things? It's very okay, Mariana assured her. Love is complicated sometimes. Rosa had spent the night in the hospital room, and her calm, loving presence had convinced everyone she was crucial to any solution for this family. The counselor says Michael has been attending group sessions, Daniel reported. He wants to see Sophie and Leo, but he's terrified they won't forgive him. Leo babbled happily in Rosa's arms, unaware of the emotional complexities around him. Sophie, however, had been thinking hard about what she wanted to say. "Can I see Daddy by myself first?" Sophie asked suddenly. "Before Leo, I want to talk to him about grown-up things." "What kind of grown-up things?" Mariana asked gently. "I want to tell him that I understand why he got confused," Sophie said. "And I want to ask him if he's ready to be a daddy again, because Leo and I need him to be sure this time." The wisdom in Sophie's words left everyone speechless. An hour later, Michael sat in the family meeting room, hands shaking with nervousness. When Sophie walked in, he broke down in tears. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," he whispered. Sophie studied her father, then climbed into the chair next to his. "Daddy," she said seriously, "I took care of Leo for a really long time, but I was scared every day." Michael nodded, unable to speak through his tears. "Are you still that sad, Daddy? Because if you are, Leo and I need you to get help so you can take care of us properly." "Sophie, I've been talking to people who help with sad feelings and I'm getting better. But I understand if you don't trust me right now." Sophie reached over and took her father's hand. "Mama is coming home, and Aunt Rosa is here, and Officer Daniel and Miss Mariana are helping us. So you don't have to fix everything by yourself anymore, okay?" Michael looked at his brave, wise daughter and made the most important decision of his life. "Sophie, I promise you and Leo that I will never leave you alone again, and if I ever feel too sad to take care of you properly, I will ask for help." Sophie smiled. "Can Leo come in now? He missed you too." "Daddy, when Mama gets here, are we going to be a real family again?" Michael pulled his daughter close. "Sophie, we're going to be better than we were before, I promise." Elena's car pulled into the hospital parking lot just as the afternoon sun began to set. She had driven for 18 hours straight, stopping only for gas and coffee, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. What would her children think of her? Would they blame her for leaving them? Inside the hospital, Sophie had just finished her conversation with Michael, and Leo was finally meeting his father again. The baby, who had no memory of the abandonment, reached immediately for Michael's face with his tiny hands, babbling happily. "He remembers me," Michael whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time in weeks. But the emotional reunion was interrupted by Daniel's radio crackling to life with urgent news that would complicate everything. "Daniel, we have a problem," his partner's voice came through. "Child Services has just opened an official investigation. Someone reported the case to the state, and they're sending a supervisor to evaluate the family situation. They'll be there within the hour." The news hit the room like a thunderbolt. Mariana's face went pale as she realized what this meant. "What does that mean for Sophie and Leo?" Rosa asked, instinctively pulling the children closer to her. "It means," Mariana said carefully, "that the state will now decide what happens to the children. The case is no longer just a local matter." Sophie, who had been listening carefully, felt her stomach drop. "Does that mean they'll take us away from everyone?" "Not necessarily," Daniel said quickly, "but it means we need to show them that this family can be safe and stable." Just then, Elena burst through the hospital doors, her hair disheveled from the long drive, her eyes wild with worry and exhaustion. The moment she saw Sophie and Leo, she let out a cry that echoed through the entire ward. "My babies," she sobbed, rushing toward them. Sophie ran to her mother, and for a moment all the pain and fear of the past weeks melted away as Elena held her daughter in her arms. Leo, recognizing his mother's voice, reached for her with excited babbles. "Mama, you came back," Sophie whispered. "I knew you would come back." But the joy of the reunion was overshadowed by the looming threat of the state investigation. Michael, still holding Leo, looked at Elena with a mixture of relief and shame. "Elena, he began, but she interrupted him. Not now, Michael. Right now, I just need to hold my children. Daniel pulled Mariana aside. How bad is this? What are the chances the state will separate the family? It depends, Mariana said grimly. They'll look at the abandonment, Michael's mental health issues, Elena's immigration status, and the children's welfare. If they decide the parents are unfit. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what was at stake. Rosa, who had been watching the family dynamics carefully, made a decision that would prove crucial. I want to formally request custody of Sophie and Leo, she announced. As their aunt, I have the right to petition for guardianship. Elena looked up from where she was holding Sophie, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. Rosa, what are you saying? I'm saying that if the state tries to put these children in foster care with strangers, I'll fight them. Sophie and Leo belong with family. The tension in the room was palpable. Here was a family that had been separated by circumstances, finally reunited, but now facing the possibility of being torn apart again by bureaucracy and legal complications. The caseworker will be here soon, Daniel said. We need to present a united front and show them that this family can work together to protect these children. Elena looked around the room at Michael, Rosa, Daniel, and Mariana, all the people who had become involved in her children's lives during their darkest hour. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady despite her fear. What do we all need to do to keep our family together? The state caseworker arrived exactly 1 hour later. Ms. Patricia Henderson was a stern woman in her 50s who had seen every kind of family crisis imaginable. She carried a thick folder and wore an expression that suggested she had already made up her mind about this case. I'm here to evaluate the safety and welfare of Sophie and Leo Thompson, she announced, barely acknowledging the adults in the room. I need to speak with each parent individually, and I need to interview the children. Elena's heart sank as she watched Ms. Henderson's cold, professional demeanor. This wasn't the compassionate social worker she had hoped for. Ms. Vasquez, Henderson said, consulting her notes. You abandoned your children for 2 months to pursue work in another state. Is that correct? I didn't abandon them, Elena said firmly. I was working to create a better life for my family, and I thought their father was caring for them. But you didn't verify their well-being during that time? Elena's face flushed with shame and anger. I called Michael every week. He told me the children were fine. Henderson turned to Michael. Mr. Thompson, you left 2 small children alone for weeks while you lived in a homeless shelter. Can you explain this decision? Michael's hands shook as he tried to find the words. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought I could earn money quickly and catch up with my family. I never meant for them to be alone for so long. And during this time, a 6-year-old child was caring for an infant on the streets. The infant became severely ill due to malnutrition and exposure. Sophie, who had been listening quietly, suddenly stood up. Excuse me, lady, she said with surprising firmness. Henderson looked down at the small girl with surprise. Yes? You're talking about my family like we're bad people, but we're not. Mama was working really hard to give us a good home, and Daddy was sick in his heart because his daddy died. And I took good care of Leo because that's what families do. The adults in the room held their breath as Sophie continued. Officer Daniel and Miss Mariana and Aunt Rosa all helped us, and now we're together again. Why do you want to break us apart? Henderson's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained professional. Sophie, I'm here to make sure you and your brother are safe. Sometimes families need help learning how to take care of each other properly. But we already learned, Sophie said. Daddy promised he won't leave us alone again, and Mama came back from far away, and Aunt Rosa is going to help us. We don't need to be separated. Rosa stepped forward. Ms. Henderson, I've already filed paperwork to request custody of the children if needed. They have family support. They don't need to go into the foster system. That may be, Henderson replied, but there are serious concerns about both parents' ability to provide stable care. Mr. Thompson has documented mental health issues and a history of abandonment. Ms. Vasquez's immigration status is uncertain, and she left the children with an unstable caregiver. Elena felt her world crashing down around her. After driving through the night to reach her children, After finally being reunited with them, she was going to lose them to bureaucracy. "Please," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't take my children away. I know I made mistakes, but I love them more than my own life." Michael, who had been silent during most of the interview, finally found his voice. "Ms. Henderson, I failed my children in the worst possible way, but I'm getting help now, and I have support. Give me a chance to prove I can be the father they deserve." Henderson closed her folder and looked around the room at this complicated, broken, loving family. "I'll be making my recommendation to the court tomorrow morning," she said. "Until then, the children will remain in temporary custody with their aunt under supervision." As Henderson left the room, the family sat in stunned silence. They had come so close to being reunited, only to face the possibility of legal separation. Sophie climbed into Elena's lap and whispered, "Mama, are they going to take us away?" Elena held her daughter tight, not knowing how to answer a question that could determine their entire future. That night, while Sophie and Leo slept peacefully in Rosa's hotel room, the adults worked frantically to build a case that would convince the court to keep the family together. Daniel had called in favors with colleagues, Mariana was preparing documentation of the family's progress, and Elena was gathering every piece of paperwork that could prove her commitment to her children. "We need character witnesses," Mariana explained as they huddled around the hotel room table. "People who can testify that this family deserves a chance." "The hospital staff," Daniel suggested. Dr. Chen saw how devoted Sophie was to Leo and how the family responded to being reunited. Elena pulled out her phone. "I can call my employer in California. They offered me a transfer to their branch here in town if I needed it. That would solve the immigration and stability issues." Michael, who had been quiet most of the evening, finally spoke up. "I have letters from my counselor and the shelter director. They document my progress and my commitment to getting better." But as the night wore on, everyone realized that their biggest challenge wasn't gathering evidence. It was the fact that Sophie and Leo had already been through too much uncertainty. At 2 a.m., Sophie woke up crying from a nightmare. "Aunt Rosa," she whispered, "I dreamed that the lady took Leo away and I couldn't find him." Rosa held her niece close. "Shh, mija. Leo is right here, sleeping safely. But what if she takes us away tomorrow? What if we never see Mama and Daddy again?" Rosa's heart broke as she realized that these children, who had already shown incredible resilience, were now being traumatized by the very system meant to protect them. Early the next morning, as they prepared for the court hearing, Daniel received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. "Officer Matthews, this is Janet Price from Channel 7 News. We heard about the case of the 6-year-old who saved her baby brother. Is it true that Child Services is trying to separate them from their family?" Daniel's blood ran cold. "How did you hear about this?" "We have sources at the courthouse. This story is about to go public. Can you comment?" Within hours, news vans were gathering outside the courthouse. The story of Sophie and Leo had captured the public's attention. Brave girl saves baby brother. Family faces separation. Elena watched the news coverage with growing dread. This is a nightmare. Now everyone will know our business. But Daniel saw an opportunity. "Elena, this could actually help us. Public pressure might influence the judge's decision." At the courthouse, Henderson approached the family with a grim expression. "The media attention has complicated things. The judge is under pressure to make a decision that will satisfy public opinion." As they entered the courtroom, Sophie clutched her mother's hand tightly. The room was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and supporters who had been moved by their story. Judge Patricia Williams called the court to order. "This is a highly sensitive case involving the welfare of 2 minor children. I will not allow this courtroom to become a circus." Henderson presented her case. "Your Honor, while the family has shown progress, the fact remains that these children were endangered due to parental negligence. The state recommends temporary foster care with supervised visitation." The words hit the family like a physical blow. Sophie began to cry, and Leo, sensing the tension, started fussing in Rosa's arms. "Your Honor," Rosa stood up, "I formally request custody of my niece and nephew. They have already been through enough trauma. Separating them from family will only cause more harm. Judge Williams looked down at Sophie, who was trying desperately to stop crying. "Young lady, would you like to say something to the court?" Sophie wiped her eyes and stood up on shaking legs. "Your Honor, I know grown-ups think kids don't understand important things, but I understand this. My family loves each other. We made mistakes, but we learned from them. Please don't take us away from each other. Please let us stay together." The courtroom fell silent as everyone absorbed the words of this remarkable little girl, who had already shown more courage and wisdom than most adults ever would. Judge Williams closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the decision that would determine the fate of this family. "I'll announce my decision after a brief recess," she said finally. As the family waited in the hallway, surrounded by media and uncertainty, Sophie looked up at Elena and whispered, "Mama, I'm scared." Elena held her daughter close, fighting back her own tears. "Me too, baby, me too." The courtroom felt electric with tension as Judge Williams returned to her bench. Sophie sat between Elena and Rosa, holding Leo's tiny hand while her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was the moment that would determine whether her family would stay together or be torn apart forever. "In my 30 years on the bench," Judge Williams began, "I have seen many cases involving child welfare. Some are clear-cut, others are more complex. This case has challenged me to consider not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of justice." Elena held her breath, squeezing Sophie's hand so tightly it almost hurt. "The facts are undisputed. These children were left alone for weeks and suffered as a result. Under normal circumstances, this would warrant immediate removal from parental custody." Michael's shoulders slumped as he prepared for the worst. "However," the judge continued, "this court must also consider the extraordinary circumstances that led to this situation and the remarkable evidence of healing and commitment I have witnessed today." She looked directly at Sophie. "Young lady, your testimony has reminded me why we have courts in the first place. Not to punish families for their worst moments, but to protect children while helping families become their best selves." Sophie felt a tiny spark of hope flicker in her chest. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I am making the following ruling. Sophie and Leo Thompson will remain in the temporary custody of their aunt, Rosa Vasquez, for a period of 6 months." Elena's heart sank, but the judge wasn't finished. "During this time, both parents will complete mandatory counseling programs. Mr. Thompson will continue his treatment for depression and attend parenting classes. Ms. Vasquez will work with immigration services to secure her legal status and will maintain steady employment." The judge's voice grew warmer. "If both parents successfully complete these requirements, and if the children continue to thrive in their aunt's care, I will then consider reunification of this family." Sophie looked up at Elena with confused hope. "Mama, does that mean we get to stay together?" "Most importantly," Judge Williams continued, "Sophie and Leo will remain together in the care of a loving family member while their parents work to prove they can provide the stable home these children deserve." Elena burst into tears, not of sadness but of relief. They weren't being separated. Sophie and Leo would be safe with Rosa, and she and Michael would have a chance to prove they could be the parents their children needed. Michael stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. "Your Honor, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I promise I won't waste it. See that you don't, Mr. Thompson. These children have already shown more resilience and wisdom than many adults. They deserve parents who can match their strength." As the court session ended, Sophie ran to Elena and threw her arms around her mother. "Mama, we did it. We get to stay together." Elena held her daughter tight, looking over her head at Michael, who was crying tears of gratitude and determination. Then she looked at Rosa, who had opened her home and heart to children who needed stability. "Sophie," Elena whispered, "you saved us all. Your courage and love kept this family together when everything else failed." Sophie pulled back and looked at her mother with eyes full of wisdom beyond her years. "Mama, families don't give up on each other. That's what you taught me." Outside the courthouse, as they walked past the reporters and cameras, Sophie turned back one last time to look at the building where her family's fate had been decided. "Aunt Rosa," she said, "is Mama really going to get better? Is Daddy really going to learn how to take care of us again? Rosa knelt down to Sophie's level. Mija, your parents love you more than anything in the world. Sometimes love needs help to grow strong again. That's what these 6 months are for, to help your mama and daddy become the best parents they can be. Sophie nodded solemnly, then smiled. The first completely carefree smile anyone had seen from her since this entire ordeal began. And then we'll really be a family again? Sophie asked hopefully. Yes, Mija, Rosa said, pulling both children close. And this time, you'll have so many people who love you that you'll never have to be scared again. As they walked away from the courthouse together, Sophie looked back one more time at the building where her family's future had been decided. She thought about that cold morning on Maple Street when she had whispered desperately to Officer Daniel, "Please, save my baby." Now, months later, she realized that in trying to save Leo, she had actually saved them all. Her love had brought together a community of people who cared. Daniel, Mariana, Rosa, the doctors, even the judge, all working to protect what mattered most, keeping families together. "Mama," Sophie said as they reached Rosa's car, "tomorrow can we start planning for when you and Daddy come home for good?" Elena's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes, baby girl. Tomorrow we start planning our forever." In that moment, as the afternoon sun painted golden light across the courthouse steps, Sophie felt something she had almost forgotten during those long, frightening weeks on the street. She felt absolutely, completely safe. The baby's cry that had echoed through the cold morning air on Maple Street had finally been answered. Not just with rescue, but with healing. Not just with survival, but with hope. And as Leo babbled happily in Rosa's arms, reaching for the sunlight streaming through the car window, Sophie knew that sometimes the best families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that love each other enough to put the pieces back together, stronger than before. 6 months later, the same courthouse that had been filled with uncertainty and fear was now filled with joy and celebration. Judge Williams smiled as she looked down at the Thompson-Vasquez family, who had returned not as broken individuals seeking mercy, but as a united family ready to begin their new chapter together. Elena stood proudly beside Michael, both of them transformed by months of hard work, counseling, and determination. Elena had secured her immigration status and a stable job with the company's local branch. Michael had completed his depression treatment and parenting classes, and most importantly, had learned to ask for help when he needed it. Sophie, now 7 and more confident than ever, held Leo's hand as he took his first wobbly steps across the courtroom floor. The baby who had once been so sick was now a healthy, happy toddler who laughed easily and loved everyone around him. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice steady and strong. "We're ready to be a family again." Judge Williams reviewed the glowing reports from counselors, social workers, and teachers. "The progress you've all made is remarkable. Sophie, how do you feel about your parents coming home?" Sophie stepped forward with the same courage she had shown 6 months earlier. "I feel happy, Your Honor. Mama and Daddy learned how to take care of their feelings, and they visit us every day. Leo knows they're his mama and daddy, and they know how to make him laugh. And most importantly," Sophie continued, "we all learned that families don't have to be perfect to love each other. We just have to keep trying and helping each other." Judge Williams officially terminated the custody order, returning Sophie and Leo to their parents' care. As the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in applause from the small group of supporters who had followed their journey. Danielle and Mariana, who had become like extended family, watched with tears in their eyes as Sophie ran into her parents' arms. Rosa, who would continue to be a constant presence in their lives, held Leo as he clapped his hands excitedly at all the celebration around him. Later that evening, in Rosa's backyard, where a "Welcome Home" banner hung between 2 trees, the family gathered for their first official dinner together. Sophie had insisted on helping Elena make pancakes, the ones she had dreamed about during those long weeks on the street. "Mama," Sophie said as she carefully flipped a pancake, "remember when you used to tell me stories about our dream house?" "I remember, Mija. What made you think of that?" Sophie looked around at the faces of everyone she loved, Elena, Michael, Rosa, Leo, and even Daniel and Mariana, who had stayed for dinner. I think our dream house isn't about the place. It's about all of us being together. Michael, who had been quiet during most of the celebration, finally spoke up. Sophie, I need to tell you something important. You saved this family. When I was too sad to think clearly, when Mama was too far away to help, you kept Leo safe and you kept hope alive for all of us. Daddy, Sophie said seriously, we all saved each other. That's what families do. As the evening wound down and Leo fell asleep in Elena's arms, Sophie curled up between her parents on the couch, finally feeling completely safe and secure for the first time in months. Tell me the story again, Mama, Sophie whispered. About the little girl who was brave enough to save her baby brother. Elena smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved her family so much that she would do anything to protect them. As Elena began the story, their story, Sophie closed her eyes and listened to the sound that had become music to her ears. The gentle breathing of her baby brother, the steady heartbeat of her mother, and the quiet presence of her father beside them. The cry that had once echoed through the cold morning air on Maple Street had been replaced by laughter, love, and the sweet sound of a family that had found its way back home.